So it's one of those periods where there's a lot going on in FGO, and this release almost kind of just got swept under the rug, which is a little bit feeling for my thoughts on this particular unit in FGO. Of course, I am talking about the Lancer 5-star variation of Sakamoto Ryoma featuring his big snake wifey Oryu over there. And the reason I say it's kind of fitting that they almost got swept under the rug is that they're kind of, I don't want to say a bad unit, but they're not good. Again, I'm going to say this and people are going to get like really upset in the comments, but they're more of just like a mid or average unit, which doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're good. They're just kind of there. They do exist, but they're not really performing on the level that I would like to see them at, which is particularly disappointing because when you look at their kit on paper, you're almost like, oh, this is going to be like the Lancer version of Muramasa, right? They're both art AoEs, they've got the 50% arts buff, they've got a 50% battery, they're both stacking their NP damage. They even have some applications in challenge quests because they're very defensive. These guys are going to be really, really good, but in practice, they're not all that great. Now, I still use them from time to time over on JP, but that's just because I get bored using like Ibuki all the time. And sometimes I would like to use another unit and I might crack them out on a good, archer note or something. But realistically, they're not all that great. And we're going to break them down in today's video. Now, one thing that I do actually want to address is they might perform a little bit better than what I'm showing in the background. I will be very transparent that my guys are only at 777 because I am completely out of hero proofs and I am not going to go grind like 120 hero proofs just for this video. I'm sorry, man. So just know that some of their farming might be a little bit better, some of their 3 turns might be a little smoother, but I do not think it's going to be so much better that it changes my opinion. Now, before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like in the video and you subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content, as I do upload FGO videos every single day. I also stream over on my Twitch. I'm trying to get back to every single weekday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, probably going to be FGO. And then Tuesday, Thursday, so I don't get completely blown out, just kind of playing FGO every single day, it's going to be like Arc Nights and maybe a little bit of Master Duel if I'm feeling really masochistic that day. But with all that being said, let's start diving into their kit, starting off with their hits, where they don't look all that great. I'm kind of seeing their kit now as opposed to what I looked at it 2 years ago, and I was like, they've got 4-hit arts cards, they got the 5-hit extra, they've got a 5-hit quick card, their star gen is solid enough at 12%. But then you kind of glance over at their NP gain and it's only 0.47%, which you might think, well, don't worry. I mean, Castoria is so good that she can get these guys to farm and loop and do fine. And yeah, she can, but she's more like dragging them along than they are kind of working as a cohesive team. I think either if they just had like maybe 10% more NP gain or just an extra hit on their NP, because they do only have a 3-hit AoE arts NP, and I think if they just got that 4-hit treatment, they would perform so much better. I do want to kind of make a little note of their passive skills over here because they do have a unique one, and usually when a servant has a unique passive skill, I do like to highlight it. Obviously, they have the very strong 12% quick buff that they're going to be giving themselves. So especially when we get mighty chains and you are going to be going for those like Buster Arts quick setups or Buster Quick Arts, whatever you want to do for your mighty chain, that'll be a lot stronger for your NP gain, extra stars, and it might even increase the damage enough to maybe like break a bar or something, right? It could come in clutch maybe 1 or 2 times, right? But then you have this shape-shifting buff that's going to give them a little bit of an insulation against critical attacks and also just an additional 10% crit damage, which is nice because if we do go over to their first skill, they have a solid enough crit buff. Now, the first skill in general here actually is all very solid buffs. They're giving 20% art to the entire party for 3 turns. They're buffing everybody's crit damage by 30% for 3 turns. Theirs is actually going to be 40%, again, because of that passive. And they're giving everybody 1 stage of overcharge for 3 turns that last once. This on its own looks so crazy, and again, it's actually good. I'm not going to say like, oh, I'm going to pull the wool over your eyes and be like, oh, it's actually bad. No, it is good, because if you think about this in your standard art setup, right? If you think about this with just say double Castoria, you're not doing anything fancy. The arts performance buff, because she has 3 arts cards, is going to make her own NP gain just that much better and might help her get to some of her NPs that she might have missed by like 10 to 5%, right? Those little niche corner cases become a lot smaller because of this, and the buff to the overcharge stage is very strong because you're going to get an extra hit of solemn defense, which you're probably already going to be firing this maybe after Ryoma's NP if you want to get that extra hit. That means just firing Ryoma and then chaining Castoria's own NP already nets you 3 hits, which is insanely powerful. But even if you want to have her NP go first so Ryoma gets that attack buff, you're still looking at least 2 hits. It's just very nice. But then you start thinking about Tamamo, who has a very charged NP refund overcharge effect that she's going to be getting a very strong effect out of, because usually you're putting Tamamo at the very end of your NP chains because you want everybody else to use their NP, then she refunds them now that they're empty. And with this, I mean, you could get to like overcharge 5 very, very easily with some of your Tamamo setups. And then you think about Proto Merlin, who we're going to be getting for the next summer event. Like, she's got, again, pretty much the same exact NP as Merlin, and so getting that overcharge stage is just that much better, right? This is already very solid for not only themselves, but just in your traditional art setups that you're going to be using. And the crit damage, I know it's kind of a meme to be like, oh, DPS Castoria, but sometimes if you just find yourself with like too many stars because you're running like 20, 30, maybe you've also got Proto Merlin providing stars, and you don't find, you know, any of your Ryoma cards on one of your chains, they might actually come in clutch, especially against like, I don't know, like a Berserker boss or like an Assassin boss. They might just go Hamtaro with that 30% crit damage buff, because keep in mind, they're also getting the arts buff and their own attack buff. So very funny things can happen with this skill. Moving over to her second skill, this is, again, also very, very strong. 50% battery is just never going to be bad. It allows you to have decent applications and like 90 plus farming, because just having that giga massive battery is always going to be clutch. But then if you want to bring them to more difficult content, they've got 100% buff removal resistance for 3 turns, and they are immune to debuffs for 3 turns. Just flat out cannot have their buffs taken, cannot be debuffed in any way, which is crazy. This is insane. I believe they're the only servant that I could really think of off the top of my head that has a combo like this. Like, Ereshkigal is kind of close with her first skill, but this is just straight up, no chance, get it for 3 turns, no string attached. And it's also tied to a 50% battery, which is just going to help them get to their NP, which gives them more defensive effects. Which is why when I talk to people about Ryoma, you know, this 5-star version that we have of him, I'm like, you're getting so much more out of this guy if you bring him to more difficult content, because his skills are just tailor-made to just blow the backs out of some of these bosses, right? He's just absolutely insane. I think if they just slap a power mod on his NP, say they buff the NP to give it a little bit higher damage scaling, even though his damage is not that bad, we'll get to that later, and then you slap a power mod on that as well, it just kind of gives him more of a niche case to use in a lot of these challenge quests, because right now he's kind of like a Melusine where there's no real special person they're super good against. It's just Melusine is Melusine and Ryoma is an AoE, so you're probably going to use Melusine over, you know, these guys. But then their third skill is obviously also just very strong. They give themselves a 30% arts and buster buff and refunding 10 stars every turn for 3 turns, right? Which just completes their package. They get a nice buff on their buster cards because they do have 2 of them, so their buster crits can look kind of nice. It does mean with their first skill, they have a 50% battery for free for 3 turns, which is insane. The 10 stars every turn plays super nice if you want to go like double Castoria with 20 30s. You know, you bring a friend that's got 1 Maxima broken. If yours is Maxima broken, you could just be getting 30 stars per turn, which is absolutely nuts for an art setup. Just completely invalidating all the quick servants and everything. But even if you have your own, which is just like 8, and then you have a friend that's Maxima broken, that's still 28 stars a turn for free for literally doing nothing. It gets more insane when you start pairing like Proto Merlin, who has, again, the Merlin NP, where they're just generating stars every turn, plus the overcharge to get even more stars every turn, and it could just get out of hand. Like, this is actually a good arts crit servant because they could just play very nicely with the other supports. They provide their own stars for free, no real cost, and then they also just have stuff like 20-30, which is really nuts. And so their skills look really nice. I think the NP is just where the ball was dropped, but even then, it's not all that bad. When they fire the NP, they're going to give themselves defense of 50% for 1 turn, which procs first, which is just kind of nice, I guess. I don't know why you would need to have the defensive buff as you're firing your NP, but I don't know, maybe in like 2 years, the enemies will like try to counter you mid NP or something. So they'll be really good for tanking it. But 50% defense, I mean, essentially cutting down the enemy's attacks is going to be very, very nice. It's going to make them very tanky. And in some of the attempts that I've done with them on challenge quests or against bosses, this is very, very impactful. But if you're going to use them for farming, you want to use them as like, again, a Lancer Muramasa, they do stack their NP damage every turn for 3 turns, and that also does proc first. Keep in mind, the first NP is going to be 25%, because I'm making a note of that because I'm going to show you some calcs in just a second to show that their damage is not as bad as you actually think. The first one is going to get that NP overcharge, so then that's going to be 25%, and then your next NPs are going to be 28 plus 20. So by wave 3, you've got a 50% arts mana burst that is then going to be multiplying into a 65% NP damage buff, which is just really good free damage. Their damage does get pretty decently high. It gets up to like 30k. That's like your Ptolemaeus, right? Like that's really, really high up there. It's just the problem with them is that just the 3 hits on the NP, I don't know why that just seems to make them so detrimental. It just doesn't really give them the power that they need. And I do think Ptolemaeus is a very interesting comparison to go with, because Ptolemaeus also has an AoE arts NP, and he has very similar NP gain. His is around like 0.40 something percent as well, but he has a 5-hit AoE arts NP. They recognize the problem of like, okay, if we're gonna give them low NP gain, we have to give them higher hits on their NP. And you know, for Ryoma, I'm just asking for 4. I just want an extra 1. But this dude, Ptolemaeus, got 5, right? So it's just like one of those things why Ptolemaeus feels so much better to use. He's got an extra 2 hits on them with similar NP gain and a very similar kit. I mean, not to also mention there's like the whole changing, you know, classes and everything, but we're talking about him as like your AoE arts farmers, right? And it also might just feel very disappointing for these guys in particular, like the example of saying, oh, they're going to be like a Lancer version of Muramasa. But the thing for Muramasa is he's building up that NP damage, but he's also building up the arts card buff. And the reason that's so killer is that the arts buff is also giving him, again, extra damage. Those are double buffing into each other, but it's also NP gain. So even if he starts off a little bit rough, he's getting better as the farming goes on. Each node gets easier to farm because his damage is going up, but so is his NP gain technically. And so that's just why, I don't know, for this, you know, Ryoma unit, I was so gassed when they came out, and I looked at their kit and I was like, these guys are going to be crazy. Like, they're built really well for CQs. They should be able to farm just fine, but that 3-hit AoE NP is just really holding them back. Again, you can get the job done. If Ryoma and Oryu is like your favorite couple in FGO, because they are very wholesome, if you do like them, you can use them, but maybe try to use them in more difficult content, because then you really get to feel how strong the unit is, which is why if I'm going to be ranking the servant, I'm going to be giving them a C+. Again, think about, you know, you're getting your math test back, you know, you got a C+, that's like a 75 to like a 79, right? You didn't fail, you know, you got a high C, almost got that B, but you're just missing out on something for that kind of just average good grade that you're looking for, that nice B, that like 80 to an 89%, which is just a little unfortunate. But like I said, they really can't alter the amount of hits that a lot of these servants have, but what they can do is buff the NP. They can give them a power mod, and that maybe makes them a little bit better going into more difficult content. They could also buff them to have, like, say, an NP gain skill. I even think somewhere along the lines of like 20 to 30% can be very good, because in some of this testing, I started using Parasussi in some of these builds, and he gives 50% NP gain, which is a little ridiculous, but when they get that, you know, big NP gain buff, they just start farming like an absolute god. Like, they're just really, really good. You just see them going from like farming 78% to farming 100% of their NP back easy. And again, that's with a 50% NP gain, but I imagine you give them like anywhere in the ballpark of like 20 to 30%, plus maybe even like a small power mod as like a skill, even if you just want to throw that on something, that can make them very, very impactful. But I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know if I'm being a little too harsh on them, but I think I'm judging them very appropriately. But let me know your thoughts. Drop that like on the video, subscribe to the channel, make sure you're coming out to those Twitch streams. I don't care if you don't know a difference between an Arknights and a Yu-Gi-Oh card, you still come out to those streams. But with all that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, late guys.